Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's event. I'm Laura Dillon from MS Dynamics World, and we are here today for a session all about why end-to-end expense management for Dynamics GP can save you money. Our presenter today is a regular presenter here at MSDW, Mary Mellert with Kwik Tag, and it's great to have her back here with us again today. So as we get started, please know that we do welcome your questions. You can enter them in at any time during the presentation in the Q&A window on the right side of the event window. And I know that Mary will be leaving time at the end to answer as many of them as she can. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand things off to Mary to get us started.
Thanks so much, Laura. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear. Thanks.
Awesome. And the screen shows through as the digital transformation, why end-to-end expense management for Dynamics GP saves you money, yeah?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So thanks, everybody, for taking some time this morning. As Laura mentioned, we are going to talk about the overall value of end-to-end expense management. Now, this conversation and demonstration will be included as part of this presentation this morning, and this is all focused on not only the value of having an end-to-end expense management process within your organization, but also the direct integration, and why it's featured here, the direct integration with Dynamics GP. So lots of tools might be able to give you a feature here, a feature there, but truly having an end-to-end system that integrates very cleanly with Dynamics GP is not only going to save you money, as we'll see here, but also a lot of time on both the front-end experience for your end users, those people submitting expense reports, and your back office team, the accounting team that's currently dealing with the paper that's coming in to process expense reports today. So let's take a look at what that costs and what it looks like in your organization probably today. Many of you will probably be able to relate to this. So what does expense management cost today? Well, research suggests that 52% of all expense reports and receipts are physically mailed to accounting today. And if your organization fits into that 52%, it's probably a good thing that you're joining this conversation to understand how automation can truly help this process. So what does that translate to on a expense report by expense report basis? Well, again, research shows that $26.60 is the average cost of a manually processed expense report. So what does that look like? Well, when your team, whether they're sales, consultants, trainers, maybe just remote employees, travels on behalf of the business, they come back at the end of that experience, the end of that trip, and the situation is something like this. They dump their briefcase or their backpack or wherever it was they've been shoving their receipts in from the first time they left their house to when they got back, and now they've got this pile of paper. And the thought, let me tell you, is just overwhelming about having to sort through, make sure they didn't lose any along the way, and hopefully have gathered and correctly been tracking all of these receipts that were incurred on behalf of a business trip, on behalf of their business expenses, right? So I have this stack now of receipts that I need to get into an expense report. Well, in the old days, or in some cases the current days, why we're having this conversation, right? People are still creating a manual spreadsheet, building line by line what each one of those receipts was for, and then they're printing that Excel spreadsheet, and in some cases either stapling those receipts to that Excel spreadsheet and mailing them in, or in some cases taping them, remember this, taping them to a sheet of paper, copying them or scanning them in so that at least you have a backup that you're the expense submitter, you know that everything gets to be part of that expense report. And then you're putting them in an envelope and mailing them somewhere. I used to have this experience when I worked remotely for a company that was globally headquartered in the UK. So I would mail the expense report and all of the receipts to our US headquarters. They would then put it into the next package that was going to be sent over to corporate and global headquarters, and then I would wait. Now, here's the other frustration part, and one of the key reasons that the cost of this gets so expensive so quickly is that you've got lack of productivity, lack of visibility, and you've got an employee who's maybe now a little bit frustrated because they have no idea when they're going to get their money back because they've incurred an expense on behalf of the company and they now know nothing about the visibility or the processing of that report. So in addition to the time and the postage and the delay, there's all of these other back office costs that are adding up, and the employee nor accounting has any visibility into it. So when you add the automation element of an expense management solution, organizations can see up to 600% reduction in approval cycle time, and we'll see an overall increase in employee satisfaction while reducing those processing times and costs. So if you had to put yourself into one of these categories of size of organization based on the number of expense reports that your organization processes every month, you can see here that about 51% of the organizations, now this is generally speaking mid-market data, so most of us on this call are going to fall into one of these categories. Mid-market companies, 51% of them say that they process less than 500 expense reports per month, so an average smaller mid-sized business there. Now the next graph, the very next graph on this chart, shows that 20% of organizations are processing more than 10,000 expense reports per month. And of course, the rest of the mix is everywhere in between. So even if you're on the low end of expense reports processed, you can see how that cost and time and lack of visibility would add up very quickly. So based on the number of expense reports that your organization is processing every month, we're going to be able to come up here in a minute with the cost of doing that in your organization. So what are some of the challenges also that research and our customers tell us maybe you can relate? Well, the challenges are that there's an inefficiency, first of all, that comes with coming back with that stack of paper and now needing to create a manual spreadsheet expense report and hoping that you get everything in right and that you don't transpose anything. You can't go back and view it once it's in the mail. And, you know, if something is wrong, you find out about it weeks later as the end user, as the submitter of these expenses. At the same time, accounting has zero visibility into the spend. They might not be aware of all of the different trips or events or projects, engagements that the organization has sent people on behalf of. So they don't know if they're going to get 20 expense reports or 50 expense reports from a given department. So the lack of control over spending and the liability associated with those is very blind for the organization, for the accounting team. And so maybe you can relate to that, wondering how many expense reports you're going to get in from this team around the company, around the country, in some cases, maybe even around the world. So that lack of visibility is certainly a challenge, especially for the accounting team that has to process these expense reports. Lengthy reimbursement cycles. As I mentioned, when you drop it in the mail, you don't know if it's going to be a week, 2 weeks, a month by the time you get that reimbursement back. In addition to some other policy enforcement and overall tracking of T&E expenses, of course, all of those things come to play here. But the biggest challenges really are going to focus on that manual, inefficient process, lack of visibility, and lengthy cycles. So if you can relate to that in your organization, or if you hear employees complaining and calling and saying, hey, when am I going to get my expense report payment? These might be indicators that it's time to use some of this research, use some of this industry data to build a business case for your organization to adopt an end-to-end expense management cycle. Well, you can clearly see here what it costs. And this is, of course, just some simple math using an average of 300 expense reports even, that if you process 300 expense reports per month, that's going to cost about $8,000 on average. If you look back at that cost, $26.60 per expense report. And that factors in all of those things, the manual time it takes to create it, the mailing, the processing time, all of that goes into play here. So what can we do about it? We've demonstrated through our research and through customer experience, maybe even your own pain points and complaints and comments that you hear within your organization, that there's certainly frustration in this process today. There's certainly a lot of manual steps, inefficiencies built into this process today. So what can we do about it? Well, if you know anything about KwikTag, you know that we're at our core, a document management system. In other words, we've been enabling organizations to go paperless, begin their digital transformation for years now, 21 of them to be exact. And so we've helped companies get paper and other digital documents into a single system, into one system that's responsible then for managing and capturing and tagging documents so that employees across your organization can find those documents, whether they're accounting related or contract related or human resources or some other area of the business. Capture the documents, get them into a system, begin that digital transformation. So capture is step one. Then our deep integration with GP, I'll demonstrate some of that for you with the expense management solution, and we'll talk about it in a few other areas that you might be using it today or that you might be interested in learning how to use it in the future as well. And then automation. So the automation part is going to be key when we look at specifically the expense report process, but also in other areas of your business. You may know the AP automation, for example, that KwikTag has done for a number of years as well. So when you look at your system and think in your processes and think, I need to begin some sort of digital transformation, think of it in these three simple steps. First, capture the documents digitally, integrate very nicely with GP, and automate those processes to really cut down on that inefficiency and the lack of visibility that your teams are currently experiencing. So with that, I'm going to show you what I mean by that. And I'm going to switch into a demonstration. I'm going to just swap screens here really quick. And as you're looking at this screen, if you've seen any previous versions of our expense management solution, we literally have started over, and the same foundation, of course, exists. The functionality exists, but we've got a lot more user experience enhancements as well as the visibility into the entire process all along the way is much cleaner, and it's very nicely presented in such a way that you'll see that it's easy for everybody involved. Laura, a quick tech check there. Did that switch to my demo screen now? Do you see the KwikExpense dashboard with my mouse in the upper left-hand corner?
Yep, we sure do.
Perfect. And everything still sounds okay?
Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So we're going to take a look now at what this experience looks like. So what do I mean when I say end-to-end expense management? Well, we're going to look at it from three different roles. You can see on the right-hand side, this view is logged in as Mary CFO. Then I click on the next tab over. Now you see that we have Mary Department Manager, and you see the change a little bit on the screen there. And I'm going to go one more tab over, and now you see I'm logged in as Mary. That's where we're going to start. We're going to look at three different user roles in this process, and the first one is going to be Mary. I just want you to be familiar that there's going to be three different steps in these two different types of processes. Now, what's new and exciting and completely different about the way that you're going to process your expense reports and process your receipts once you begin with a solution like KwikExpense is that you're going to begin with those receipts being digital. So repaint that picture of I just came back from the trip. Instead of dumping the receipts out on my desk and hoping I have them all, what I have done along the way now is simply take a picture with my phone and email them in to KwikExpense. Those are going to come into my incomplete receipts. So what I'm showing you here is the left-hand side of my screen here is my receipts area. You can see that in the upper left-hand corner of that view. The right-hand side of my screen looks like I'm all caught up there. That's nice. My reports side of my screen, so things pending submission, pending approval, etc. And then down here I have some tasks, things that are pending my review. Now, as Mary, in this role, I'm the traveler. So let's just say I'm in sales and I'm going out to an event and I come back with these receipts. So I have some that are pending submission, meaning I've already given them data and they're waiting to be put into an expense report, but I've also got some here that are incomplete. So we're going to take a look at those first. That means I've emailed them in and they're now waiting for me to do something with them. So I'm looking at this receipt. I can just toggle that view there and add receipt data. So I click on the little hamburger menu, excuse me, and then we'll click add receipt data, and we'll be presented with a panel on the left with very few fields that are actually required, as you'll see here in a second. Now, I also mentioned that the tight integration with GP is going to continue to be a benefit for you here. You can see here, you don't even need to think about it, but the company ID for this receipt has already been selected and defaulted to Fabricam. So I know that this receipt was processed for an expense I incurred while traveling for our favorite GP company, Fabricam. Now, if I had multiple GP companies, I click this little list, I select a different company, and away I go. I don't need to log in or out of a system or anything like that. I'm going to put a little bit of data. I'll just grab today's date. We'll say that we can see that this is parking. My browser has, of course, remembered many of my favorites or things I've entered before, so it's easy for me to select. And then I have to do a little bit of coding. Now, I say coding almost in jest because I really just need to tell the system that this receipt was for me and I'm in sales and that it's an expense type of travel. The rest of the information is basically optional other than the dollar amount. So I picked two things from drop-downs and I entered one piece of data, the dollar amount, for the receipt line level information here. So I can go ahead and submit that receipt now very simply. Now I could also add a line item. Let's say I drove to this meeting. Well, of course I'm still in sales, and I'll tell you why it's funny that we called that coding in a second here, but I drove to that meeting and I drove, let's say, 20 miles. So now instead of entering the line amount, I just enter the number of miles that I drove, and the line amount was calculated for me automatically because the system knows our default company mileage rate. Okay, so now I'm done with that receipt line. So now I have two receipt lines on this particular receipt, and I'm going to go ahead and submit it. So as the expense user, think about the difference in what I did before, where I had to manually create a line, enter a whole bunch of information. Now all I have to do is give the data to the receipt, and it's ready for me to put into an expense report. So let's do one more together. We'll pick another one. We'll select today as the receipt date. Looks like this was a lift to the airport. We'll put in lift. We'll select our department. Now here's what I meant when I said it's almost funny that I'm putting these in as codes, because they're really just layman's terms for telling KwikExpense what department you are in and what expense type you're selecting for, and that it's reimbursable so that KwikExpense knows that it's going to be paid back to me instead of to a corporate card of some sort. And then I enter the dollar amount. Now what's going to happen, and this goes back to the tight integration with GP, what's going to happen is those two fields, department and expense type, are going to be converted to GL codes when this process completes and actually concludes inside of Dynamics GP. So we've entered a few pieces of data about some receipts now. So now you can see we only have 3 that are incomplete, but our pending submission went up to 9. So we'll just take a look at those. And yeah, it looks like we have several here in September. We can go ahead and create our expense report there. So we'll click back to our dashboard. And if you're familiar with the KwikTag experience, web experience from any prior version, or maybe you're a current user for KwikTag of some other system, this whole view is going to be new to you. This is the KwikExpense module, and it has its own dashboard. It has its own receipt visibility, expense report, and the option to switch user. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so we've got several receipts now that are pending submission. So we're going to go ahead and create our report. Now we created this. We tagged those receipts as reimbursable. So we're going to tell our report that this is a reimbursable expense report. So we're just going to grab, let's say we did this for the last week or so through today. And we'll just change this to be MSDYN 2018 so that we can track it and submit. So again, KwikExpense is now going out and building that expense report on my behalf. So what did it do? It said, okay, Mary, you had a whole bunch of receipts that were pending submission, and it was a reimbursement. They were all tagged as reimbursable, and they were in that date range. So great, here you go. In just that couple of seconds, it built this expense report for me. There it is, expense report name MSDYN 2018 that we did together. And I can look at these receipts. I can say, all right, there's the lift. There's a couple parking. This one looks like it has a couple line items. Yep, sure enough. There's the one that we added the mileage. We can see that there. If I needed to make any edits to these receipts, or I did realize that I forgot something along the way that was supposed to be part of this, I can go back and add it at this stage before I submit my report for approval. Now, we saw everything. It looked good. So we're going to go ahead and click on our hamburger menu there and send for approval. So as Mary, if you remember, we said we'll look at 3 different user experiences. Mary is the traveler who came back from the event, had all of these receipts and needed to submit them to her manager, in this case, Mary, department manager. We're going to change roles pretty quickly here, so try to keep up. So I'll go through a lot of information. We'll try to keep it broken down to very specific stages in the process. So at this stage in the process, Mary, the user, came back from her trip, built her expense report after tagging a little bit of data about the receipts, and now we see she has only 3 receipts that are pending submission now. Everything else went into that report that we just viewed. And look, sure enough, there's an email notification that Mary Department Manager is getting about the report that was just submitted. So let's hop over to the Mary Department Manager view, and we'll just click refresh there. And we see down at the bottom that Mary Department Manager now has an expense report pending her review. So we can take a look at that report. We can certainly click on the row and view it, and we'll take a look at this in email as well. A very nice, clean experience. You can see it's all HTML5. If I was on my tablet or my, touch screen laptop or anything like that, I could just click, tab, drill into these. Even to see the images, I click on that right away. I can see the image that's associated with that line item. But here again is where that coding is starting to build up. Now, as the department manager, I may not care even still about the actual GL codes. I just need to know that, my sales, meals, travel, that, meals budget, that's what's going to come out of there. And my sales travel budget, I've got $294.40 that's going to come out of there. And then I can see all of these individual line items. I could look at any one of these receipt images if I wanted to, drill into that, take a look at all of the detail here, or I could just collapse it all and say, okay, here's the total. We see the total purchases amount was $328.89. It was submitted as reimbursable for Mary. Now, here's the other view of that. We received an email notification that said, Mary Department Manager, Mary, same thing, submitted this $328.89 expense report. Nice, clean view of the data. And now we see all of the line items broken down with that data still. Sales meals, sales travel, and let's say I'm on my phone at the airport or at a coffee shop or whatever. I just click tap to approve, tap to reject. If I'm going to reject it, I'm going to tell Mary why, because she needs to know, hey, this wasn't coded right, or this shouldn't have been coming out of my budget, or you need to fix something there. It doesn't look like you've got it all right. Or if I wanted to even open and see the full view of the HTML file so that I could drill down and get all of that additional detail visibly this way, I can do that as well. So we're presenting that reviewer and approver a lot of very easy ways for them to drill down and look at the expense reports that they're responsible for reviewing and, of course, approving. So we'll close out of the email, and we'll do it here in our online system because we're logged in again as Mary Department Manager responsible for this. But just so that you know, there's a lot of different ways that you can drill down into this data, see the line item level, and even approve or reject at the line item level. So let's say I look at this one and I say, sales meals, $1.86. All right, I'm probably going to let that go. But let's say that was $111.86, and maybe I didn't want to approve that. I could reject just that line item as the approver and say, hey, this seems to be outside of the accepted limit there. You might want to take a look at that. Or I need a little bit more explanation. Was this with a client or something before I approve that? So I can even approve or reject at the line item level. So we'll come back up to the top level and go ahead and approve the whole thing. Again, click on our little menu there, and we can either approve or reject the whole report, or we can send it back at the line item level. We can also here start to see a workflow history. So if I want to drill down even again at the line item level or at the whole view, I can see that there as well. We'll go ahead and approve it and say good to go. Comments are optional, of course. We don't need to put those in. But now, as department manager, we've done our job. We've said, okay, Mary submitted this reimbursable expense report, routed to us via email and here in our KwikExpense dashboard. We looked at all of the details. We reviewed the line items. We made sure they were put in the right budget codes, in our case, layman's terms, right? Sales, meals, sales, travel, simple stuff. And we approved it. So we're all caught up now with the things that are pending review. Oh, but check this out. Look, we just got an email notification, and now it's back to Mary that says, hey, your expense report has been approved. So again, that visibility aspect, right? In the old days, or again, maybe today in your world, your people who are submitting expense reports, they don't know the status once it gets physically mailed in. until something comes back to them, most often in terms of the fact that they're actually getting their reimbursement. They have no visibility in the meantime. So now I get that notification that says, hey, your expense report's been approved. Great. That probably means I'm going to get the money back pretty soon. So awesome. I can go back to work and not even think about it. So now, as Mary Department Manager, our job is done. We reviewed their expense report, approved it, and on it went. It's going to go, by the way, to Dynamics GP, but hold that thought before we move on from there. The next thing that we're going to take a look at, so that was reimbursable. That was our reimbursable expense report. We had a few receipts that we're going to get money back for. The next thing, and this is super exciting, if you're using a corporate card of any kind, I have Amex set up here in my demonstration environment. Maybe you're using Capital One or Bank of America or Wells Fargo, whatever, for your Visa or MasterCards. If you're using whatever corporate card, bank or vendor, you issue corporate cards to your employees or frequent travelers, maybe your management team, maybe your sales staff or the like, you're going to issue them the cards, and instead of reimbursing them, you're going to pay that corporate card vendor, but you still need the receipts from those people who went out and traveled on behalf of the business and used their American Express in our case. So let's take a look at that experience. So now we're traveling again, now as Mary Department Manager, because she's the one who's been issued the corporate card. So we can see we have this expense report that's pending submission. Let's take a look and see how much work we've got left to do there. Well, I can look at it. It says pending submission. I've got one receipt here. That's great. But when I come over to my menu, I can't send for approval. You can see this is grayed out. I even get a message there. It says this expense report has not been reconciled and you have missing receipts. All right, well, so that means I got to go find some, right? Well, I don't have to look too hard because the next option is show missing receipts. So that's pretty cool. So I can see that I'm missing 2 receipts, one in the amount of $55 and one in the amount of $10. Okay, great. Let's go back to our dashboard and do a little bit of work there. Now, before we do that, let me just show you the accounting view of this. This is great. Accountants love this because they're the ones, who are responsible for currently reconciling the corporate card statement and chasing the maybe dozens, maybe hundreds of corporate card users across the organization. So let's just take a quick look. What's Mary got going on? Amex, Mary, let's look at her September statement. There you go. She's got 3 receipts that she was responsible for. Looks like one of them is in. We can tell that because it's green and it says matched. 2 of them are still missing. Now, as accounting, let me tell you what happens in many situations. We hear this from our clients. We used to experience it ourselves because we use this system internally, of course, as well. When our accounting team would get the corporate card statement at the end of the month, they would download it or receive it in the mail from the vendor, and they would make multiple copies of it and then highlight on those copies just Mary's receipts, just Dale's receipts, just whoever's receipts, and then give those physical pieces of paper, or sometimes they would even have to cut around it if it overlapped 2 pages or whatever. Painful process, right? Give those pieces of paper to those of us who had corporate cards and wait for us to write our codes and what they were for on there, write our budget codes essentially on those pieces of paper and get them back. Well, I don't know about you guys, but maybe we're not all in the office at the same time. Now I have to go back and scan it and email it and hope that everything got to the right person, right? Again, adding to that time, that cost, that frustration. You know what it's like at the end of the day. You didn't sign up to be cutting papers and running it around the building. You want to be responsible for the financial aspects of your job. You want to be able to be used as a business critical, way more than data entry and chasing paper, right? So you want to put your skills to good use. This is going to enable you to do that. If I wanted to send Mary a notification now, I can click on that little menu and say send missing receipts. Now, Mary Department Manager is going to get an email notification that says, hey, you're missing these 2 receipts. Could you get them in? I got to pay the bill. So again, taking that manual step out of the equation altogether. So that's Mary, the accounting view. We'll come back to that again in a second. But let's go back to Mary Department Manager so that we can get those receipts in and finish our report. We saw that we have 2 missing, so we'll now come back to enter those receipts. Now, though, when I come to enter my receipt, the first thing I'm going to do is change my payment type to be Amex, and all I have to do is select those transactions and find the receipt that associates with it. I see here very clearly that's a $55 meal, and so here's my dinner $55 receipts, because unlike when I sent those in from my phone at the beginning for the reimbursable, I could have just as easily sent this in from my phone. Maybe I've saved it to my desktop. Maybe I have a special folder that I like to put my receipts in. So all of those are going to be accessible. All of these receipts are going to be accessible at my fingertips, regardless of how I get them into KwikExpense or into my visibility. So I come down now, and I don't have to enter very much data at all. It's populated the receipt date, the receipt amount, and even the comments and description right from the corporate card statement. So all I need to do is tell it that I'm in sales and that this was a meal, and everything else is done. So I submit it. Super easy. Now, I can then just do the same thing for that one other missing receipt. Had I checked the little add another document box, it would have made our process even simpler, and I would only have had to do this once, but you'll get the idea. We'll come back to Amex Mary Select now. You can see we only have one missing receipt. We'll go ahead and select that, find our $10 car receipt. There it is. Open it up over there, and again, say sales, and then put in travel, and everything else is done for me. Now, if I had multiple line items that I needed to separate for this receipt, again, I can't change the total at the $10 amount. That's on the corporate card statement. It's already been processed. But what if I needed to charge $5 of this to travel for sales and $5 of it to travel for professional services or support or something like that? I would just break it down at the line item level such that as long as the total was the amount of the transaction, it would be fine. If we had more to do, we would check this box, and it would bring us back to the screen for our next receipt. But since this was our last one, we should be in good shape now. This should be all of our corporate card receipts that are required for this Amex that's pending submission. So let's take a look. Now, when we drill down and look at our 3 receipts, we see that we have them there, and we can say send for approval because that's now an option for us. The system knows that all of the receipts that Mary was responsible for this transaction period have been submitted. But before we do that, let's hop back over to Mary, the AP person, for a second and just take a quick glance at what her reconciliation status looks like now. So we select the card for Amex Mary, we come back to September, and we see that they're all green and matched. So life is good. AP Mary is happy. Mary Department Manager now has all of her receipts entered, and she can go ahead and send that report for approval. So we've taken now the other side of the equation and said, for a corporate card, all the transaction data is there. I really just need to find and match up my receipts to those transactions. I don't need to think about it much because the system is giving me all of that information. And on the back end, it's giving the accounting team that reconciliation view so they don't have to do the copy and scan and cut the paper along the way. So what happens with that report now that Mary Department Manager has submitted it? Well, it goes to Mary CFO. So Mary CFO is now going to get a notification, much like the email notification that we got for Mary Department Manager. And we clicked over on our new tab to be in the Mary CFO view. So now we see we have one expense report pending review for Mary CFO. So when I click on this row, again, I get this nice, clean HTML view. I can expand down to the receipt level, the line item level if I want to, view the actual images so that I can see it right in line there. The same experience, again, would happen if we get, there's our email notification right there. If we get that email notification, here's the one that showed us the missing receipts, by the way, just in case you wanted to have that visibility for ease of use for those users. Maybe they're in a different building, maybe they're not even in the same state, but they get that notification to go get those receipts. Approval required. Here's our message to Mary CFO that says, hey, here's Mary Department Manager's expense report. This is the Amex for September. We need you to review it. Again, tap approve, tap reject. Either way, if I'm in a mobile environment on my email, the most common experience that people are going to deal with this email situation, especially if they're not in the office all the time, they could do that just as easily from a mobile device or a tablet or whatever. They can drill down, see all of that, look at the images if they want to. And then they go ahead and approve or reject. So, and of course, we have this workflow history. So as the CFO, I can see who put the receipts in, who's submitting the expense report, and all of that. If you like the grid view, of course, we make that available as well. But we'll give you a couple different options there. We'll go ahead and approve this expense report. And we'll say, okay, to pay. Again, comments are optional, but we'll do it just for fun. Keep things moving along. So what happened to those expense reports? Well, I made mention earlier that if you're familiar at all with the way that KwikTag integrates with Dynamics GP, either from a document management standpoint or an AP automation standpoint, you know what comes next. You know that upon completion of, let's say, an AP automation workflow, a payables transaction entry record is going to be created inside of GP. How does that happen? Well, guess what? The same thing is going to happen for this expense report. So now I hop over to GP. There's that expense report approval notification, by the way. Mary, department manager, just got notified that her report was approved. So if we come into GP, KwikTag comes to life on the additional menu. If you're not familiar with KwikTag, well, we have lots to talk about later. But for now, just follow along for the expense management portion of this. On the additional menu, we're going to come straight to our work queue. And this is where all approved, what we're going to call in this case now, invoices come once they've gone through a KwikTag workflow. Because what we have now done is convert those expense reports to be invoices. Look at that. I hover over these bottom two transactions. Those are the expense reports that we just created and routed for approval together. We didn't enter at any point in that actual GL codes, right? We put sales and meals and travel and that sort of thing. But I've got several GL codes here at the line item level. I can even see it. Let's even right click and take a look at that document. It opens for me right here with all of the data and the drill down ability, and again, even the option to view those receipts. So this entire package of this HTML file, of this expense report, including the receipts that are part of that file, are now going to be visible to me inside of GP. So what does that mean? As soon as I click, let's just put both of these into a batch here. We'll go ahead. Now, if I was going to put all of these, let's say, into an expense management batch, I could grab them all. I'm just going to grab the couple that we were working with here. Here's the one reimbursable. We can see it's payable to M. Miller. And then we can see the corporate card for the Amex statement. We could view that one and drill down to the details as well. But for sake of demonstration, we'll just go ahead and put these into their own batch. We'll put them as, whoops, I kind of put my cursor in there. You guys know that. It's always good fun inside of GP. We'll just go ahead and put that there, create a new batch, and put these two expense reports into that one batch as now payable transaction entry invoices inside of GP. So they're disappeared out of our work queue now for KwikTag, and when we come back to our voucher inside our voucher list inside of our PTE screen, we can simply just find those receipts and we put them right here. We'll go ahead and look at the M. Miller one first. Go ahead and select that, and we see the document number that gets automatically created. We see they were put in the proper batch, and we can now look at the GL distributions to see all of that detailed breakdown of the line items and how those receipts were actually coded. And then check this out. This is really cool. I go additional view documents now to see that association. And sure, of course, I expect the expense report, the summary level detail to be there, but then I can also click and see the receipt data and even images as part of this transaction that now lives inside of GP. So we can save that one. Let's just take a look at the Amex one as well. We'll go back to our list of vouchers and get the one that's payable to American Express. And because it's part of the corporate card, of course, I'm going to batch those up and pay them all together. But I can now see that this has the vendor as Amex. Again, the GL distributions have all been coded for me based on the fact that I put sales meals, sales travel, whatever our layman's terms examples. We're going to work with you to figure out what those should be, of course, in your organization based on your GL structure and who approves for whom and all of that kind of thing. We'll work all of that out with you. And now when I go additional view document to see that connection between this file for the Amex payment, I can also see the breakdown of the summary for each code as well as the individual lines with their corresponding receipts as part of this file. So the whole end-to-end process of capturing receipts very quickly, sending them into KwikExpense, tagging a little bit of data around them really takes the time and the pressure off of those traveling users, traveling employees or contractors or consultants that work with your organization and today have to bring them back in paper format and probably manually create those spreadsheet expense reports and mail them into somebody, or best case, even email. But still, you lack that visibility once you've sent it in. And then get an automatic notifications when things get approved, and for the approver, even if they're in or out of the office, get a notification, tap, approve, reject, drill down, view the data, and move it on to the next step. Upon final approval, it comes into GP just like any other invoices that you might be using our AP automation solution for example, or let's just go back and say, take a look at one of those that we need to add something to it later. And this is just sort of we'll call this a bonus glimpse into the additional document management features that you get even just as part of the solution. You come back to the additional menu, and let's say we need to add something new to this. Let's say that we got an updated, comment or email notification that was part of this process from let's say the manager from a different department because they were responsible for part of this budget. They said, hey, here's an email, it's got an attachment. I can just drag and drop that email right over to that little tag bar. And KwikTag is saying, are you sure you want to attach this to this message to this transaction? I say yes. And now that email, I could do that with a document. I could scan something in and have it be even paper if I needed to do that, or I could have something living on my desktop or in a file structure somewhere on my folders or whatever. So I can drag and drop, or I can upload, or I can even scan in documents, additional information that might be relevant to this transaction. All of that, again, comes with standard KwikTag document management integration right inside of GP. So I'll see the ones that we created as part of the transaction, as well as any additional files that we add to that later down the road. Now, of course, all of those files are then still stored and accessible for me inside of KwikTag. And of course, if there are expense reports, let's take a look back at our expense reports as Mary Department Manager of where are our approved reports? Well, I can now go back and see exactly which reports have been approved and where they were. Maybe I want to take a look at the workflow history, see how long it takes my manager to approve things on average. Gosh, I'm doing a demo, and so it looks like they happen pretty quickly here. But if this was a normal scenario and it might take a day or two, I could easily see exactly where things were in the status and in the process and how long that was taking. Okay? So I have that full visibility as both the submitter and for things that I'm responsible for approving at any level, or as many levels of approval are required for your organization. So now we're going to switch back to the other screen here, round out with a little bit additional conversation. And I would just encourage you again to, if you have questions, please go ahead and submit them into the questions bar in your WebEx view. We will do our best to get to as many of them as possible. But I'd like to just sort of summarize with a few things that you may not be familiar with KwikTag, KwikExpense, and or our other automation solutions. We've just taken a look, of course, at end-to-end expense management. So as you think about, again, that simple receipt capture, I had an email even sitting in my inbox. You might have noticed that it said receipts. I had just emailed those to myself. I would simply forward that on to my expense email. We're going to give you a standard email for submitting. And what's great about that is your company has probably already given you phone access or mobile access to have your corporate email, let's say on your phone in this case. So that's what's happening here. This simple receipt capture comes from the fact that KwikExpense knows that Mary is an employee and that her email address is an input to KwikExpense so she can submit receipts very easily. So I snap the picture, I email it in, and then it's waiting for me as incomplete because I've sent it in and it needs some data. We looked at the easy online data entry experience. Few pieces of information, mostly drop-down. Again, real-time connected to GP, even though I, as the user, don't need to know any of those codes. I just need to know layman's terms, examples for department and expense type, that sort of thing. We get email notifications throughout the process. We'll take a look at some of those examples as well. And of course, the automatic expense report creation, as well as the instant credit card reconciliation for our accounting team. And what's nice about those email notifications too is that, again, think about the time that your accounting team is spending running around chasing for paper right now and how much more valuable their time would be spent elsewhere, actually working on finance and budgetary and reporting and that sort of thing. So let the system be the bad guy. We call these the nagging emails, and take advantage of it. Let the system you can send that missing receipt email as many times as you like. It's kind of fun when you get it 3 times in a row. It's like, okay, I'm working on it already. So you get the idea. So the overall benefits, of course, go back to those pain points, of course, that we talked about at the beginning, right? The lack of data entry that people are going to have to do now because they can simply capture and submit receipts from their phone. Those employees are going to be happier because they're going to get paid faster. They don't have to create manual spreadsheets anymore. And even more than that, they have the visibility into the process, and so does accounting. So that automatic routing for approval and response is certainly going to decrease the processing cost and time, but also increase everybody's satisfaction because they have that visibility. And the payable transaction entry creation inside of GP is unlike anything that we've heard from other clients and partners that we work with, companies like yourselves, all the time. So organizations really want that deep integration with GP, and you'll find that here with KwikExpense right inside of GP as well. So you're eliminating the bottlenecks, and you're enabling your accounting team to instantly reconcile with your corporate card statements. Now, I gave you a quick glimpse of what else is possible with the integration with GP, adding additional documents to transactions, getting quick access to your work queue of things that are already approved, and if you're looking for a sneak preview of if you wanted to do this for invoices, our interface for that looks and feels just like GP as well. So we'll table that discussion if you want a demo on another time, but think about the fact that you can then use the same system, which is the point of automating any business process. You can use the same system for your expenses, your accounts payable invoices, your document management, and as represented on this screen, lots of other areas of the business. Because here's what happens, folks. People start using a system like this. They give access to, let's say, the accounting and finance team to go, hey, did you know that you could find and search and share things with KwikTag and it's integrated with GP? So whether you're a GP user or not, you have access to all this stuff. Well, that's great. What about down the hall in human resources or legal or training or marketing or whatever other department? If there's file cabinets out there, chances are they could use this same type of system, and you don't have to buy another one because it's all part of the same platform and same system at the end of the day. So think about other areas of your business where it makes it easy to extend and really reduces your overall cost because you're getting additional benefit from the same system. So for those of you who are brand new to KwikTag, I'll give you the 30-second overview in that we were founded in 1997 and quickly became a Microsoft development partner. So early 2000s, we began to integrate very deeply with GP and, of course, NAV and SL and AX as well. And within GP specifically, you can get that tag view search functionality on 79 different screens. So even if you're just looking to take step one of that digital transformation and get rid of the paper, start to go paperless, you can do that very simply with our connector to GP on 79 different screens. As a result of our 21 years in business, we have more than 120,000 business users around the globe, and they're all supported right here in Tempe, Arizona, which, by the way, is almost going to be the perfect time to come visit us. So if you need some training, and if you're coming to Summit, definitely let's connect there. It's literally right in our backyard. So we hope to see you, and a snapshot here I'm sharing with you of our KwikTag customers. I call it the KwikTag family. What's important about this is that there's no one shape or size or industry or type of organization that's represented here. As you can see, all shapes and sizes from nonprofits to sports organizations to healthcare, financial services, all across the board, because chances are they struggle with the same challenge that we started this conversation with. Inefficient processes, manual dealing with a lot of paper, manual situations dealing with a lot of paper, and potentially frustrations in the delay that comes along with those manual processes and lack of visibility into them. So with that, I hope that you have seen an end-to-end experience that you could apply in your organization here. Certainly happy to do a one-off demo if you've got specific questions you'd like to drill into. We're happy to take that as a follow-up conversation. But for now, I'm going to hand it back to Laura and address the questions that have come in just from this session here.
Great, thanks, Mary. Yes, and now this is the time. If you've got some questions from that great demo that Mary did, go ahead and get those typed in, and I will get us started. Let me take a look here. Let's see. Here's one. What kind of summary/graphics could you extract after quarter, year period in order to analyze data?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, Laura, the question is about what reporting is available?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So yeah, there's a lot of different reports that are standard out of the box in terms of what can be summarized by user or by expense date range, that sort of thing. Those are the most common reports that people look at. But at the individual user level, they can see at any time their own reports that have been submitted. From the accounting standpoint, once they create that batch inside of GP, they can literally view it just as they would any other grouping of payables transaction entries based on how they process their payments for either reimbursable expenses or corporate cards. So they would then rely on the GP reports that they use for that type of transaction today. But if there's additional reports that are needed based on the data that lives in KwikTag or lives in KwikExpense, we can easily build that type of view for you. The expense report view is the most commonly used one, where people can then go back and say, you know, what was this report? What did it include? Did I get all my receipts in it? When did it get approved? And what was the overall value of it with the summary of that? So user level as well as accounting level view, they also have that access to see what things are in process, what things have been approved. And then of course on the corporate side, they get that reconciliation view. But if there is some report that you need that isn't covered for that, chances are we can customize and build one for you. Yeah, great question.
Okay, good. Okay, let's see what else we have. Is there a limit to the number of expense reports that a user can submit?
Nope, not at all. In fact, the way that KwikExpense is licensed is essentially all in one based on the number of users that you have. So you simply pay a per user fee and you get access to the end-to-end submission, route for approval, creation, or if you're an approver, you get the access to approve, and there's no additional cost based on transaction or expense report or anything like that. It's just a per user subscription license.
Okay, let's see. Moving through here, how does the corporate card statement get into KwikExpense?
Yeah, great question. I didn't have time to show that. What happens is that when your accounting person goes out to your corporate card website, let's just say you download a CSV file, for example, you just upload it right into KwikExpense in that reconcile tab. We took a quick look at where we send those reminder emails from and where we could see everybody's Amex statement in our demo environment, of course, and you just drag and drop it right into that experience, and it parses everything, and it says these receipts, these transactions were Mary's, these were Laura's, these were Dale's, whatever, and then it breaks it down. So it's literally just a download from your corporate card vendor and an upload or drag and drop, whichever you prefer, into KwikExpense. Yeah, great question.
Okay. Let's see, I think we've got time for one or two more. This looks like a two-part question. Do expense submitters have to be GP users or are the licenses tied together?
Yeah, another great question. No, not at all. They don't have to be expense submitters do not need to be GP users, and the licenses are entirely separate. If you have a KwikTag for GP license, let's say already, because you're using it for document management or AP automation, you still have that same level of access inside of GP through KwikTag or inside of KwikTag to search, find, share documents. But if you're an expense submitter or an expense approver, you don't need to be a GP user, and the licensing is entirely separate from that. So you don't even need a KwikTag for GP license, let's say. You just need a KwikExpense user license for that. Yeah, good question.
That's the last one. Let's put out a last call for questions. Does anyone else have a question for Mary? Okay. I guess we'll begin to wrap up there, Mary. Thanks so much for all that good information and that great demo.
Thanks,
just so everybody knows, we did record today's event. Yeah. And we'll be making that available very soon. And if you would, on your way out of this session, be on the lookout for a very brief survey that will pop up. The feedback helps us here at MSDW. It helps our presenters as well. It should only take 10 or 15 seconds. And with that, I guess we'll wrap it up. Thanks, Mary, and thanks, everyone, for your participation and attendance today. Have a great day.